Hello, welcome to Culture TV and to learn Russian from songs. In this first episode we're going to listen to a very nice and slow, calm and traditional Russian song called The Thin Rowan Tree. I'd say it's quite a fun and effective way of learning the language and expanding your vocabulary. So we'll start off by listening to the whole song. You'll have both the lyrics and the translation. After that we'll go through the whole song together, learn some new vocab and I'll explain any nuances. Enjoy!
Стоишь, качаясь, тонкая рябина, головой склоняясь до самого тына, а через дорогу за рекой широкой так же одиноко дуб стоит высокий.
Как же мне, рябине, к дубу перебраться? Я б тогда не стала гнуться и качаться тонкими ветвями. Я б к нему прижалась и сева листами. День и ночь шепталась.
Нельзя рябине к дубу перебраться.
Знать судьба,
Судьба такая, век одной качаться.
Okay, so that was the whole song. I really do hope you enjoyed it. Personally, I really like it. I find it very calm, soothing, obviously traditional and even emotional at times. So I'm sure you'll agree that it's very nice. And you'll notice that there's a lot of personification used, a lot of figurative language, imagery, and so on. And that is very common here in songs, but not just to songs actually, but to poems and just literature in general. And this is achieved through the Russian grammar. All these cases, all these genders that words have, that is what makes Russian such a beautiful language in terms of literature. There are so many opportunities for creating this imagery and this beautiful language using all these grammatical elements. So that's one advantage of the difficult Russian grammar. Otherwise, I know it's very hard to learn, but if you are subscribed to our channel, if you do see our videos, then Russian grammar won't seem that hard, I promise. Right, now let's actually look at the lyrics then. Here's our first line. Что стоишь, качаясь, тонкая рябина? Okay, so first of all, стоишь is second person singular conjugation of стоять, which means to stand, to be upright, to stand upright, yes? Then, качаясь is the present participle of the verb качаться, which means to sway or to rock, but in the reflexive. So that ся, с, я at the end of any verb implies that it's a reflexive. It's like in English, I wash myself, I dress myself up, and so on. In Russian, that myself, yourself, herself, himself, and so on, is denoted using this ся, качаться. On its own, качать means to rock or to sway someone or something. Like, children might ask their parents very often to качать them on the swings. Yeah? But качаться is to be doing it yourself. So we have a rябина here, which is a rowan tree who is pretty much swaying in the wind. And I say who because, as you know, it is personified throughout the whole song. And we'll see why a bit later. Тонкая is an adjective meaning thin. So that's the name of the song. Тонкая рябина, thin tree. Now you'll notice at the start we have что, which means what. And in English I've translated it as, what are you doing there, standing, swaying, thin rowan? Now in Russian you can use что to ask the question why. So it can substitute почему and зачем. It just conveys a slightly different tone, and depending on the context it can be a more nicer, calmer, polite tone, or alternatively, in contrast, it can actually be quite rude. So you have to be careful when you use it. It's just whenever you might see this word что and then plus something else, when you might expect there to be почему or зачем instead, it has the same meaning. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So yeah, what are you doing there? In this way, of course, что is being used in a very nice way where we're trying to, well, as you'll see later in the song, we're trying to sympathize with this rowan tree. Next, we have головой склоняясь до самого тына. Головой склоняясь до самого тына. So we'll start from the end. Тын on its own means a fence, a palisade, and it's a special type of fence. It's very often found in the countryside, in rural areas near houses like this. As you can see, it's a wooden fence. It's handmade and pleated. It's a very, as I say, particular style of a fence. And it's quite a rare word in Russian, actually, thin. So you don't need to write it down. It's just there if anyone's interested. Самого is the genitive of sami. Sami, as you know, usually is our superlative particle. So it's whenever we're giving the best quality of something the most beautiful, the longest, the shortest, the tallest, the youngest, and so on. That in Russian is denoted using самый, самый высокий, самый большой. However, in this case, самый is used to say to the very. As you see in the English, I've translated it as all the way down. So we're really adding that emphasis, we're really intensifying that it's all the way down to something, to the very bottom. До самого тына. До is a preposition that means until, or in this case it's more like to. And if it's used as to or until, it always follows with the genitive case. До самого тына, самый here is in the genitive case, okay? Склоняясь is also the present participle. If anyone's actually unsure what the present participle is, it's something like being in the process of doing something, or by doing this. So it's not really the gerund, it's not that you're doing something right now, it's more like an adjective really, but it's still a present participle. Don't worry about that. Склоняться is a verb that means to bow or to incline, or to lower, and it's also reflexive. And at the start we have головой, which comes from голова, which means a head. So if you can imagine the head of the tree, we mean the top of the tree. And головой here is the instrumental case of голова. The way to remember when to use the instrumental case or to identify the instrumental case is think about the name, instrument. So it's kind of like we're using a tool to perform a certain action. So using something, we're either producing something or creating something, whatever. So using your head, or by bowing your head, in the process of bowing your head, you are then doing something. Not always are we creating or producing something, of course, but think of it as a means of you doing something. Using this or with this, that's kind of what the instrumental case conveys. So with your head, bowing down your head all the way down to the palisade. Summarizing what we've seen so far, what are you doing, thin Rowan, swaying? What are you doing there, standing and swaying in the wind, thin Rowan, bowing down your head to the very palisade, to the bottom, all the way down to the fence? That's kind of the meaning of this first section. Let's carry on. Okay, so then we have а через дорогу за рекой широкой. А через дорогу за рекой широкой. Now you'll notice that I haven't put the stress on через here, because in the song actually it does change, as you would have probably noticed with many examples. And that is done solely to keep up with the rhythm of the song. Songwriters and singers are allowed to do that so that the song sounds nice. You, however, when you're speaking to people in the street or whatever, you can't do this. You have to abide or follow the correct stress, which would be on the first syllable, через. In the song they say через дорогу, so that it sounds better. Otherwise, correctly, it is через. А in this case means and. А через дорогу. Через usually means through. In this case, it also means across. So across the road, it's more like over the road. So we're standing on one side of the road. Через дорогу means on the other side of the road. And whenever you're using через to mean something like this, you always use it with the accusative case. Через дорогу, через реку, через лес, things like that. On the other side of the road or across the road, on the other side of the river, on the other side of the forest or through the forest. All of that accusative case, okay? Then we have за рекой широкой. За is another preposition and it means behind in this case. It has several meanings, but here it means behind. Рекой широкой. Whenever you're using за to mean behind, it always follows with the instrumental case again. Рекой is obviously instrumental of река, which means river. Широкой is instrumental of широкий, which means wide or broad. So to sum up, we're standing on one side of the road. If you cross that road, you'll get to a river. That river is broad. And if you cross that river, then you will get также одиноко дуб стоит высокий. Также одиноко дуб стоит высокий. You will get a tall oak tree that is standing alone. So just as lonely a tall oak tree stands. Также in this case means also or more like just as. Также is written separately here. If they are written together all as one word, then it means also in the sense of additionally or furthermore. Также separately means just as or in the same way or likewise. Одиноко is the adverb meaning lonely. Дуб is the oak tree. Стоит, well, is from the verb стоять, which means to stand, as we saw already. Высокий means tall. And now it's the Rowan tree speaking herself. And I say herself because throughout the whole song she's referred to as a she. That makes sense because rябина has a feminine grammatical gender. But also, why am I not saying itself? Because obviously it's a tree, it's not alive. And this is where the personification element comes in. Take a look at this phrase here. Как же мне рябине? Мне. Мне means to me. It's the dative of I. It's the personal pronoun I in the dative case. So this line here is pretty much the inner thoughts of the tree. We're assuming that trees can't think, and science might say otherwise, but as far as we're concerned, trees don't think. They can't think, they can't speak, none of that. And by using this quote, this direct speech from the thoughts of the tree, there's a suggestion here that the tree is actually alive, and that's why it's being personified. Very effective use of figurative language here. Как же мне рябине к дубу перебраться? К дубу means to the oak. Whenever you have the preposition к, which means to, which is sometimes followed with or, so all in one word it can be ко, and that just depends on the words following. Sometimes it just sounds nicer to say ко мне rather than к мне. That's why sometimes you'll see or after prepositions that are composed of just one letter. So ко мне or со мной and so on and so on. But anyway, к дубу always followed with the dative. К, to plus dative, to the oak tree. And then this verb here, перебраться, means to get over to transfer, to move to. So in other words, this Rowan tree sees this oak tree in the distance over the road, over the river, and she wants to get over to him. You have to understand here that it's not about trees. They are metaphors for people, okay? So she sees this tree and she wants to get over to him because they're both lonely. Перебраться in itself is a very rarely used verb, and I wouldn't write it down. You don't need to know it really, unless you really want to, of course. Then, как же мне? Как on its own, of course, means how, and that's why I've translated it as how. But very often you get this confusion with the particle же, which we'll do a separate video on in the future. Keep an eye out for that. It's a very tough particle to understand and use correctly, but very often people say if you omit the particle je, the meaning is generally the same. And yes, in most cases that is true. However, here I think that if we leave out the je, the whole phrase is incomplete. It doesn't sound full. Как мне рябине к дубу перебраться is fine, but with that je it sounds a bit better. Now, why is it used here? We know very well that trees can't move. So when the tree herself is saying, how can I move? This je, usually je is used to emphasize this kind of element of something being obvious. Как же мне рябине? But it's obvious that I as a tree can't move. Well, therefore, if we all know that I can't move, how possibly can I? And this is used here to elicit a bit of sympathy from us as the listeners. We're meant to feel sorry for this Rowan tree because we know it can't move. And to emphasize that it's obvious, it's clear that a tree can't move, we're adding this je. It's more like, but how? How possibly can I get over to this oak tree if I can't move? It's just an intensifier here, okay? As I said, you can leave it out, but it doesn't sound complete. It sounds much more natural to add this je here. If you're getting confused by je, don't worry about it. As I said, there will be a separate video in the future, and even then it's not the most important word in the Russian language, so don't worry about it. Now here we have the explanation. Я б тогда не стала гнуться и качаться. Я б is literally I would. Б on its own is just the contracted form of бы. Again, it just sounds better when we omit the Я б тогда. You could also say я бы тогда, that's perfectly fine. But for the song, for the rhythm to be maintained, to sound nice, we just say я б тогда. And you'll see this in spoken Russian as well. That's perfectly fine. So, я бы тогда не стала. Remember that whenever we're using the conditional tense in Russian, we use the imperfect tense. So, стала is the imperfect of стать. And then we add on that conditional particle бы. Я бы стала, I would become. Now, стать doesn't always mean to become. It also can mean to start to do something. Or in this case, it's something more like to have to do something, to become necessary. Я б тогда не стала гнуться. Тогда is then. I've put that at the end in English. That just sounds better. I would then not have to гнуться и качаться. Гнуться means to bend. Not an important verb really. And качаться we've seen already means to sway, to rock. The next phrase. Тонкими ветвями я б к нему прижалась. We'll start from the end again. Прижалась is from прижаться, which means to attract to or to adhere to stick to usually. So you can say that if you're sticking something on something and you're pressing it on, you can say прижать. Прижалась, obviously, yes, same idea with the reflexive. You're being adhered to someone, you're being stuck to someone. Usually in daily speech, this is quite a neutral word. Прижалась here is much nicer. It's much more like to hug or to embrace. That's what I've translated it as. К нему, remember that к is followed with dative when it means to, so to him. Я б, again we have the same conditional here. I would embrace him, basically. Тонкими ветвями. Now that me ending at the end, тонкими ветвями, is really a giveaway of the instrumental case. So using тонкими ветвями, I would embrace him. Thin branches, really. Ветвями is from ветви. Ветви is just another word for ветки. It's used much more frequently in classical literature. You know, outside in the street, nobody would say ветви. People would just say ветки. And the singular of that is ветка, a branch. Branches will be ветки, and in literature you'll probably see ветви, but it's all the same. So using thin branches, I would embrace him. That's the meaning of this line. And then we have и с его листами день и ночь шепталась. И с его листами день и ночь шепталась. We'll go from the end again. Шепталась is from the verb шептаться, which means to whisper and the tension with someone. So if it's in the reflexive, it means that you're whispering with someone. Шептать on its own means to whisper. And the analogy here is the difference between to say and to speak. In English, you can say, I say something to someone, but you can't speak something to someone, can you? So you can say a word, you can say a message, but you can't speak a message. Same idea here. So шептать on its own is really to say, but at a low volume. And then шептаться is to speak, but at a low volume. So that's what you can use here. Шептаться, so you can be chattering with someone quietly, whispering with them. But шептать, without the ся, means to say, but, whispering. День и ночь, day and night, pretty much means all the time. С его листами. С is a preposition that means with. It's always, always, always followed with the instrumental case. You just have to remember that. That's why we have the mi ending at the end. С его листами, with his leaves. And I would whisper with his leaves day and night. And our final verse. Но нельзя рябине к дубу перебраться. Перебраться we saw already, it means to get over to. К дубу, means to the oak tree. Remember about the dative case. Но нельзя рябине. Right, нельзя usually means one is not allowed to, it is forbidden to. In this case, I've translated it as the Rowan cannot, so does not have the ability to. And you have to be very careful here when you're listening to songs or poems or whatever it is in Russian, because some words will lose their otherwise normal meaning. When it's in literature, in songs and so on, it can have a slightly different shade of meaning. In this case, it's more like can't, it physically can't, rather than it's not allowed. No one's not allowing her to go over to the oak tree. It's just that she doesn't have the ability to do that. That's why нельзя is used here. Otherwise, when you're speaking to people, yes, нельзя means, you're not allowed to. If you're saying that someone is not allowed to do something, it's always followed with the dative. So рябине, not рябина, рябине, нельзя рябине. The rowan tree is not allowed. Just like нельзя мне, нельзя тебе, нельзя ему, нельзя нам. We're not allowed, you're not allowed, and so on and so on. So if you want to say someone is not allowed to do something, the someone will always have to be in the dative case, okay? And finally, the last line for today. Знать судьба такая, век одной качаться. Знать судьба такая, век одной качаться. Качаться we know already means to rock, to sway. Одной means alone here. Век is a century. In English I have translated this as forever because, well, no, you wouldn't say here for centuries. In Russian, particularly in literature, век on its own means for a very long time or forever. Another common phrase is навеки, which means 4 centuries literally, which conveys also the same meaning, forever. Знать судьба такая. Судьба means fate. Такая, such. Such is fate that she has to now forever sway on her own. Now that word знать at the start here, you know very well that it means to know. However, in this case, it doesn't mean that. It means something like, this means that. And so you're kind of giving a conclusion here. Now this is very, very, very outdated and obsolete. Now people would usually say something like значит, значит. And значит comes from the verb значить, the infinitive, which means to mean. Very often you can ask the question, что это значит? What does this mean? However, in spoken language, this is very, very common. Значит is something like, and so, therefore. So when you're drawing a conclusion, you will say значит. When you're trying to infer something, maybe you can also say значит, and then you say your prediction, your conclusion, your assumption. I definitely recommend writing down значит. It is very, very commonly used in conversation. So that is it for this video. If you have any other questions regarding vocab, grammar, anything to do with this song, anything to do with Russian at all, please ask in the comments. I will be delighted. I will definitely answer you. Otherwise, you can always email me. Email is also in the description. Also, if you do like this new style of video where we're going to be looking at songs and analysing them and learning vocab from them, also let me know below. I really do appreciate your feedback. And yes, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for liking and subscribing. See you next time. Goodbye.